Hey everybody, how are y'all doing today? My name's Dean Reynolds, aka Decent Treatment, and welcome aboard the Electric Airship podcast. Here, we serve candid, holistic perspectives on the indie JRPG developers you love. And today's guest is the dev behind KAIJU Big Battle FIGHTO Fantasy. This game is a love letter to classic JRPGs, blending monster wrestling with the charm of Final Fantasy VI. It's Electric Airship's first game to hit consoles, and it's a real honor to be involved. Stay tuned for the rare perspective of a 27-year indie RPG developer. That's almost unheard of. Please welcome PC Harrington aboard the Electric Airship podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, how you doing today? It's the release day.
Great. Yep, today is release day, and it's been exciting. I've been testing the game out on PlayStation and Switch, and I'm loving it. It's been a very new experience seeing it on the big screen versus laptop and phones. So it's been kind of a surreal morning seeing that.
Yeah. Just like there's something about seeing graphics, mechanics that you worked on the TV on a console that kind of like itches. I don't know, maybe something from my childhood. Yeah. So. Goodness gracious. Let's just jump right into it. Like, what initially drew you into KAIJU Big Battle as a JRPG concept?
Yeah, so I've been a KAIJU Big Battle fan forever. They actually originated in the Boston area, where I'm from, before they moved out to New York. And I've been going to the live shows, following all their character drama online for years and years. Back in the day, I worked on a lot of 48-hour Game Jam games. And there was one I made in 1999 about a comic convention where it featured pop culture characters from all over the place, kind of going nuts and rampaging through a comic convention. So you had like Spock, you had Gandalf, you had Grimace from McDonald's, and there was a room that was full of monsters, and the monsters in that room were KAIJU Big Battle characters. And so you fought against Dr. Cube, you fought against Dino Kang, and actually sent that over to Studio KAIJU after it was completed. And they liked it. And at that time, they were doing like a Fan of the Month contest. And I won Fan of the Month for that. And as a reward for winning that, they sent me a bunch of merchandise, which I still have. So I have these magnets with characters on. I have Sky Deviler, Kung Fu Noodle, Dusto Bunny, Dr. Cube, Space Bugoo Choo Choo.
That's such a cool keepsake.
Yeah, so I made this game a really long time ago, and it kind of always stuck with me, and I wanted to kind of make an expanded version of that. And years later, I reached out to Randy Borden, who is the creator of KAIJU Big Battle, and we brainstormed back and forth. And I said, look, I've been making turn-based RPGs using the OHR RPG CE engine since 1998. It was originally a DOS-based engine, and now it's made it all the way to PlayStation 5, which is kind of crazy to think of.
Wow. So you sent it to the creator of KAIJU Big Battle, and he was immediately on board. Was there any hesitation or?
No, he was immediately on board. He thought the idea of an RPG was fun. I thought it would be nice to do this in this style. It's a style I love working with. I love playing and making turn-based games. I'd love to see other people make their own KAIJU Big Battle games. Randy is very receptive. So yeah, if you're a game dev who wants to make a KAIJU Big Battle game, reach out to Studio KAIJU and chat with them. I'd love to see someone make like a WarioWare style KAIJU game or a puzzle game. You could make a KAIJU Puyo Puyo, and that would be phenomenal. And I'd buy 10 copies.
Yeah, the whole extended universe of KAIJU Big Battle would fit really well into like the eclecticism of a WarioWare. For sure. That's so cool to hear that it's accessible to connect with the creator and even collaborate.
Yeah, everyone at KAIJU is great.
Yeah. So then did they give you a lot of freedom with the KAIJU Big Battle brand?
Yeah, so they had some requests on like which characters to feature, who to spotlight. And a lot of them were ones that I was planning to use anyways. So when I pitched the idea, it was just this really simple, almost Final Fantasy I style graphics that I drew myself before hiring an artist. And I had American Beetle, Roblox, a couple other characters, and a Dr. Cube just on like a test engine board that I was able to show to Randy and say, this is kind of my idea of what the game will look like. Then it was actually a couple of years of going back and forth coming up with the entire plot every character would use before I finally really started development and got my artist Soda Piggy on board.
Wait,
And
so you
yeah, so they
planned for several years before development?
we did, and that was very unusual for
Wow.
me because usually I'll write an outline for a game, but not to this degree. But we wanted to make sure everything would both fit the kaiju branding, have all the characters that were currently big at the live shows they really wanted to spotlight, who we should use as guest characters, characters who would have cameos for, some of the really old school characters who really hadn't been around since the 90s. Having them show up in the background was kind of a fun little touch that Randy requested. But it was
Nice.
always going to be about fighting Dr. Cube. He's the big bad, and we agreed from
Yeah,
that from the start. But yeah, it was a couple of years of back and forth, and it was worth it because it made the project run a lot smoother.
back and forth. So they were pretty strict with their brand, at least up front. They wanted to make sure you knew the ins and outs of everything, and were really
Yeah,
gonna, show it its due dignity.
yeah, they gave me a lot of freedom, but yeah, they had characters they wanted to use, and just like outlines on how the character should behave. But most of the characters at actual kaiju events don't talk. Dr. Cube does, American Beetle does, so they have pretty established personalities. They gave me freedom to establish more personality for some of the other quieter characters, and that was fun.
Right. Oh, cool. So that would be a good example of you, showing your own creative voices, uh, actually showing more personality than was originally in the source material for these characters. That's very cool.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that was a lot of back and forth. But yeah, Randy approved pretty much everything in the end, and he was a great partner to work with.
Yeah, sweet, sweet. Um, yeah. So I guess your costume maybe gives it away, but would you ever want to perform at a Kaiju Big Battle show yourself?
I would love to if I if I was younger. Um, I'm over 40 now, and I don't think I could handle the athleticism that I could when I was 20. I mean, they have some performers have been doing it for years and years, and they're still some
Hmm.
amazing stunt workers. But yeah, I'd obviously love to put on a monster costume and goof around, but I don't think I'd be jumping off the top rope anytime soon.
Right. Maybe like a judge cameo referee sort of thing.
That'd be fun. Yeah, would love
Yeah,
it.
that'd be super cool. Yeah, fingers crossed for you there. My
Yeah,
goodness. Um, yeah, I don't know if I'd want to get in the ring either, though. Frankly, yeah, it looks pretty brutal at times.
it does. It's
So
there's some amazing stunt work in some of the shows.
oh, definitely, definitely. So, gosh, just to pivot a little bit, it seems like you're really inspired by these early Super Nintendo era JRPGs like Final Fantasy VI. And that makes me wonder, like, how did you get your start with video games as a whole?
Yeah, so I the first console I ever played was an Atari. It was 2600 that my brother had, and we had a lot of games on that weren't spectacular. Um, I also spent a lot of time at the arcade, so I'd go to the arcade and play Pac-Man, come home and play the Atari version of Pac-Man, and it was not quite the same experience. Um,
Hmm.
and I still love going to arcades when I can. It's actually awesome that, at least in my area, I'm seeing more arcades and barcades opening up now, and there's so many more places to play games. Um, there's a Round One not too far from me that I love that has a ton of classic arcade games, has music games, lots of pinball. So yeah, that was
Hmm.
I got my start way back then.
Wow, that's awesome. So these arcades, they maybe played a sort of formative impact in how you make games.
Yeah, and I have never really been interested in making something that's very mechanically difficult, like a really high pressure action game. I like playing games like that. I like action puzzle games a lot, but I've never really wanted to play one. But I do have a couple arcade mini games in the Kaiju Big Battle game that I outsourced to some other developers. So there's a Space Invaders type game that was made by James Page, who's the creator of the OHR engine.
Wow.
He was able to jump on board and make a nice little Space Invaders clone. And Richard Upchurch, Spoonweaver, is a developer who built a Burger Time type game that shows up in Kaiju. And that's one that features a very old Kaiju character, Club Sandwich, who hasn't been around in a long time. And
Wow.
I just thought it'd be really funny, including a couple mini games they're just arcade games sitting in the hero headquarters for players to go and goof off in.
Cool. A little throwback to where you came from. That's awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, you said you're sort of enjoying seeing these sort of barcades show up in town. Has your relationship changed to these sorts of scenarios over the years?
I still love some of the same old arcade games I've played forever, but I also discover a lot of new ones still. I love Hamster Corporation as a publisher. That's fantastic. They've been putting out the Arcade Archive series on consoles consistently for weeks and weeks over the last few years. And it's been cool discovering some old puzzle games that I had never heard of in my life. Two that I've been playing a lot lately. One is called Emeraldia, and one is called Senkyu. And they're both 90s puzzle games that I had never heard of, and now I'm totally obsessed with.
Wow. Arcade puzzle games. Well, you heard it here first, folks. PC Harrington, the arcade puzzle gamer. That's awesome.
Yep.
So what about more obscure influences besides these arcades and games? Do they sort of weasel their way into your work? Like what kind of stuff inspires you?
Yeah, so I'd say, and for less obscure and more obscure, probably the least obscure thing that shows up in Kaiju is Final Fantasy IV. That was not the first RPG I played. The first RPG I played was Ultima Exodus on the NES. After that, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy I. But Final Fantasy IV was the one that really made me want to make games. And elements of that definitely show up. There's elements of Final Fantasy IV and VI throughout Kaiju Big Battle. Big one is that both games, Final Fantasy IV and Kaiju, end with a big confrontation on the moon where players go up into space and learn the big truth about everything that's been going on. And all the heroes leave the planet and go to space and everything goes wild. I loved that.
Yeah, that's such a cool direct inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah, so that one is a pretty direct inspiration. Other inspirations people might not think of immediately, the Yakuza games are a big one. And a big part of that is the way they blend serious drama with absurd clownishness. And yet nothing ever feels out of tone. And I really try to capture that in my games, where there's a lot of comedy and a lot of drama, and the line between them is extremely thin. Another Square title that I loved that I think influenced me was Legend of Mana on PS1. And that was another one where you travel to a lot of different zones that might feel incongruous at first, where there's a desert right next to this cave that might not make any sense, but somehow still feels organic. And I kind of liked the dream logic that game ran on. And I also loved that everything was cutesy and colorful, but then when you actually read what the characters are saying, the world is actually pretty sad and weird. And that's another thing I really wanted to try to capture. So yeah, Legend of Mana was a big one.
Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah. So what's a good example in Kaiju Big Battle of this sort of effect of like a cutesy world, and if you look a little bit deeper, it's sad and weird?
Yeah, definitely. There's hacking missions where the character Roblox plugs into machines and goes into these little, 1 to 8-bit worlds, different colors, different times. And everything is just slightly off, and all the characters speak in a cutesy manner, and it's these very simple, cartoony graphics. But underneath all that, there's this idea that this digital world is kind of this suffocating presence that's sucking the character in. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of the internet as a whole at times.
Right. Huh. That's maybe a profound statement there. One of my favorite parts of the game, for sure, are these Roblox puzzles.
My phone always corrects Roblox to Roblox every time I type his name.
I can imagine.
Every single time. That's
gotta be annoying. Yeah, because you probably type Roblox pretty often, right?
Yes.
Yeah. There's something so poetic about those sequences as well. And if I'm not mistaken, this type of thing shows up in other games in your gameography as well.
Yeah, so this whole world beneath the world started showing up in Ghost Towns, which is an adventure game I released a few years before Kaiju. It's available on itch as a free download. It's also available on Steam as part of Super Walrus Entertainment System, which is a free download that's a collection of a lot of my old games that are just kind of short concepts. Some of them are 48-hour games, so things you can play through in a sitting or two. But yes, that was the game. It was a game about identity and dysmorphia and not being able to really understand the world around you. And part of the nightmare of that world was that there was something just below the surface that you couldn't quite touch in this dream world that was represented with the same kind of graphics that I use for these hacking missions. So yeah, this kind of weird dream logic of something's adorable and then horrifying the next. Just dream shifting into nightmare. That was a big part of that game that I kind of wanted to bring into Kaiju, not as a main part of the story, but just as this kind of deeper background you can see. And that's also a major plot point of my newest game, which is Walthros Renewal, which is a remake of my very first game that I started working on way back in 1998.
Wow, that's quite exciting. Huh. So many deep concepts, dysmorphia even. So guys, if you want to check out more of these great Roblox levels, check out Super Walrus Arcade for sure. Yeah, goodness. Let's talk about OHR, huh? You started with it back in 1998. That is a long haul. So for the kiddies at home using RPG Maker MZ, can you fill us in on what this engine's all about?
Yeah, so going back all the way to the beginning, when the engine first launched, it was so small and simple. It had no scripting language. You were limited to 4 maps. Very limited.
4 maps?
4 maps.
Could they be really big?
They could be pretty big, but you were limited to the 4.
Wow.
And James was working on it constantly. And the nice thing about it being such a niche engine was, he was an active part of the community. So what people wanted and requested and noticed, he was very receptive. And he also brought in a lot of other community members who would end up becoming developers. Ralph Verstegen was a huge help in porting Kaiju, and he is one of the main developers now alongside James. But yeah, back then, 4 maps, very simple. No layering tile sets. So the original Walthros game was extremely simple, and then once we had 100 maps as the limit, I was able to expand it into something much bigger, releasing a final version of it in 2002. But yes, it was a very simple DOS-based engine that has now grown far beyond that. It was always built for turn-based video games, but yeah, as we can see with the mini games included in Kaiju even, you can make action games, you can make arcade games. If you're really willing to learn the scripting language, there's basically no limit to what you can do. We used to be restricted by palettes, by resolution. Kaiju and Walthros still use the classic 320 by 200 blown up resolution. But yeah, you have the resolution cap is gone. You can do some pretty wild things with the engine now.
Wow.
And it's still free.
Yeah. Significantly less limitations. That's so cool. I love the concept of making mini games in like more of an action genre, breaking the conventions of these often disregarded RPG engines. That's part of the artistry, right? That's part of the beauty of these things.
Yeah, honestly, I find the limitations are fun to work with sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they breed creativity, certainly. So how has the OHR scene changed since the late 90s? Think like the community.
Yeah, so the internet and social media really changed everything for the entire world, for good and bad. For indie games especially, back then, would post on forums, would share games between a few different people. Some of us had AOL websites that we hosted games on. Others had to email their game files directly to each other. I copied games to 3.5-inch discs and passed them around in high school. So that's a funny thing to look back on and think that now you can post on Steam, you can post on itch, and an indie game made by a single person can reach millions. And that's such a massive, massive change. And the community is a lot smaller than it used to be. Fewer people post on the forums, fewer people hang out, but that hasn't really slowed down the number of good games that have come out. There's a lot of games I see posted on itch that are by users I never met in the community, but they're still putting out some cool stuff.
So the people that have stuck around for this long are the really invested, talented developers making the great things, right?
Yeah, and the engine's definitely, I feel like it's very much gone mainstream with you guys helping to port this over to consoles. Um, probably the biggest mainstream OHR breakout was Franken by Samantual, which was a fantastic game. It was hilarious, and
Yeah.
she released that. I think it was maybe 2 years ago now, and that one was a complete hit. People loved it, and other ones you hear about, like I've heard people talk about Void Pyramid by Willie
Mm-hmm.
Electrics, who is a good buddy. He's made some fantastic OHR games. And yeah, people have played these without knowing what the OHR engine is. And I hope that people who check out the engine too and try to make something themselves.
Yeah, totally. It's this engine that not many people know about with a vibrant history, lots of talent in the community, and people are still making great things. So, yeah, what kept you loyal to this niche tool for so many years?
Yeah, so I learned Game Maker and I thought it was fun, but it felt more impersonal to me. I mean, there's a great community there too, but something I really liked about OHR from the very beginning, and I still think is awesome, is just how hands-on the developers are. So James Page, he's a good friend, and I've been able to reach out to him both during the porting process with Kaiju and just personal through good and bad times, just to chat. And he's a wonderful guy, one of the nicest people I've ever met. And so
Wow.
just seeing this be really his project from the beginning, and he would never say it's just about him. It's grown out to a lot of other developers as well, Ralph being a major one, as stated earlier. But yeah, just having these people on board who I can just say, hey, I'd like to see if this could be changed in the engine, or what do you guys think about changing this? And having them actually be able to respond, it's just such a cool feeling.
That is huge. So James Page will literally like show up to support your request to add a new feature.
Yep, he is very receptive over email. Um, and yeah, he just, like, I'll say, here's what the guys at Electric Airship have been talking about. What do you think of this? And he'll say, oh, this is an interesting idea. Let's see if we can work on this. And yeah, so the porting process for consoles has actually been a huge boon to the OHR engine as a whole. Lots of new features have been added throughout this
Wow.
last year, and yeah, I'm thankful to everyone involved.
Yeah. Well, gosh. Yeah. Happy to oblige. Obviously. Um, what a wonderful situation you guys have going on there. I can not even imagine talking to the RPG Maker devs and being like,
Yeah, exactly.
"Hey, can you like add pixel movement to the base engine?" They'd be like,
Yeah,
"Go away."
yep.
Um, yeah. So very cool. I can see why you'd stay. Um, but let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about Super Walrus Games, your
Yep.
studio. How did it all begin?
So Walthros was the first game. They
Hmm.
released a demo version of it back in 1998. People liked it. I was surprised that people liked it because it was the first time I'd ever drawn pixel art, first time I'd ever tried to build a real game. The first game making program I ever used was the Bard's Tale construction kit, which Bard's Tale was a series of first person wizardry style RPGs. And
Hmm.
the development kit there was basically take the resources from one of the Bard's Tale games and rearrange them however you wanted. So in that case, it felt more like modifying an existing game rather than making anything really new. So I
Right.
played with that a while, and then I said, this doesn't really do it for me. I want to make something fresh. Searched around, I found the OHR engine, started work on Walthros. And with Walthros, one of the characters was named Super Walrus Man, and he was Walrus, who considered himself a superhero. He wasn't really, but he has a big ego. And he was kind of the breakout character of the game. People liked him. And so I said, years later, I needed to pick a company name when I started publishing on Google Play. And I said, I'm going to throw it back to the Walrus Man. Give him credit for that character kind of getting me where I am today. So I named it after him.
That's awesome. You have a lot of respect for your history, where you came
Yep.
from. That's great. So, what a cool story. What does a typical work session look like for you at Super Walrus?
Yeah, so it's very different now than when I started working on Kaiju, because when I first started on Kaiju, I wasn't a parent. My daughter was born a couple years into development. So when I first started working on the game, I just work on it all the time, all hours of the night. And then I had a kid, and literally everything changed.
Right.
It's a little bit easier now that she's older. I'm able to work while she's doing her own thing. I work a full-time job when I'm not working on games as a hobby. I work at night better than during the day anyway. So, I'll come home from work, put together a character or two, maybe work on a map, something that's just kind of brief and casual. It's been nice
Hmm.
for the last couple of years. I've just been updating Walthros Renewal and the Kaiju game rather than working on a
Yeah.
big new project. So, yeah, just been kind of relaxing about it.
Okay. Well, super commendable for you to stick with development even after becoming a parent. And yeah, definitely something about nighttime is very inspirational to
Yeah.
many artists. Um, yeah. So, gosh, but it's not just you at Super Walrus all the time. You also came into an alliance with the outstanding pixel artist Soda Piggy for Kaiju
Yep.
Big Battle. How'd you do that? How'd you manage to land that great talent?
Yeah. So when I first started the game, I was going to draw everything myself. And at that time, I was not as confident in my pixel art abilities as I am now. I think I've grown quite a bit as an artist since I started work on this game. And I
Hmm.
think a big part of that came from working so closely with Soda Piggy and seeing his process and how he created art,
That's
seeing from
great.
start to finish. He put up a few videos on social media while we were making this game showing his drawing process, start to finish. And that was both cool for the fans to see and helpful for me. I feel like I learned a lot from that. But yeah, so the two of us posted on the same game dev forum, and I posted a help wanted ad looking for someone to take care of the graphics on this game. I had a few different people apply that the art didn't really go where I was wanting it to when they gave me their samples. But Soda
Hmm.
Piggy, I loved his art from the beginning. I was a fan of his art before we even began working together. And yeah, so when he said he was willing to work out, I was very happy to hire him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, naturally, it's beautiful stuff. Stuff straight off of, the Super Nintendo, pretty
Yep.
much. It's really great. So, yeah, goodness gracious. It's so cool to hear the sort of interchange you guys learned from each other along the way as well. What about
Yeah.
Glock and Mr. 8-Bit, the composers?
So Glock and Mr. 8-Bit, they're a pair of musicians that have done a few games. They've done a few hip hop albums. Um, Absolutely great musicians. They have a Bandcamp
Mhm.
site. If anyone searches Glock and Mr. 8-Bits, you'll find all of their albums for Pay What You Want. There's some great stuff on there. So Brian, who's Mr. 8-Bit, he also posts on the same game dev forum, and he came across me. So before we really knew each other, I'd released this short form horror game concept. And in this game, I used music samples from Killer 7 and Silent Hill. And he played the game and he liked it, but said, not having an original soundtrack is really holding this back. This needs its own music if you want this to be
Mhm.
worth anything. And he actually took it upon himself to compose like 5 or 6 tracks for me, just kind of out of the blue, and just made these awesome tracks. And that game was never finished, but all of those tracks have shown up in other games. And I've worked with him ever since. And some of
Yeah.
those songs have shown up in Kaiju. Some of them have shown up in Walthros.
Wow. So even in kaiju, like, where can we look out for this part of history?
Yeah, so going all the way back to the Roblox hacking missions,
Oh,
some of them
right.
have just some beeps and boops. Some of the later ones have some of the horror music that these guys composed. Um, Also, the monster lair underneath Boston that uses one of the old horror tracks. Um, the cultist missions where you go into these
Um,
kind of nightmare worlds fighting these kaiju cultists. Those use one of the old tracks. And yeah, it's wonderful being able to
yeah.
go back and use those. Now everyone gets to hear them.
Yeah, those areas have a very distinct, like, empty, surreal atmosphere. They
Yeah.
did a really great job with that stuff there. So awesome! It's great that you were so fortunate to be offered, just, I guess, for free.
Yeah, so the way I worked with Brian was Soda Piggy was a paid artist, and
Right.
we also brought on Zach Corcoran, who was an artist who helped fill in some of the final areas of the game. So I paid him to come on board. He was another longtime friend who was able to help out when Soda Piggy and I both became extremely, extremely busy towards the end of development. And he did a great job filling in some extra character and environmental graphics in the moon area. And I would guess that most people probably wouldn't tell that there was a different artist brought in at the end there. But yeah, he was
No,
great
it's
to have.
very cohesive.
Yeah, and then with Glock and 8-Bit, yeah, they've always wanted to work for free on these games, even when I've offered to pay them.
Wow.
But the agreement we ended up coming up with was they get 100% of all the soundtrack money. And I hope that people buy it. I hope with the console release it gets them a ton of new fans, and I hope people buy both this soundtrack and their other ones.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. I don't know if they just want exposure or what, but I mean, they made a couple great soundtracks for you. And so if any devs are out there watching, go check out Glock and Mr. 8-Bit. Maybe give them a listen, give them a hire.
Yeah, they've worked on indie games other than mine, and they've done some great jobs.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So let's talk more about the game of the hour, FIGHTO FANTASY. Yep. This project, it took nearly 3 years, but it originally was about to be a 1-year goal, right? How did it evolve from there?
So when I pitched it to Randy, it was a much smaller game. There was going to be just this single hub that would end up becoming the hero headquarters in the final game, but that was going to be the only place where there'd be NPCs to hang out with and talk to. There weren't going to be cities in each area, each time zone. It was always going to be about time travel, but each time zone was going to be a linear dungeon with a boss at the end. So there was going to be the hub, 4 dungeons, 4 bosses, and that was it. It was probably going to be about maybe a 3 to 4 hour game. But yeah, as we worked on it, developed the concept, and then once everything started getting fleshed out between me and Soda Piggy, and we got more and more songs for it, we all just kind of wanted to expand this, and I'm thankful for everyone who stuck by me as this game became massively larger than we originally planned. But I'm glad it did. I think that the smaller game wouldn't have been as memorable as the final one that we put out.
Yeah, okay. Cool. So even despite your smaller initial goal, the creators of Kaiju Big Battle encourage you to shoot higher, do bigger things.
Yeah. Wow. Randy said, "I'm happy if you make 1 game, but I'd be happy if you make 2, if you make 3. Just if you like it, keep doing it." So
wow.
Yeah, he was all on board.
That's awesome. So is there potential maybe for a FIGHTO Fantasy 2 in the future?
It depends on how the console release goes, is what I'd say right now.
Right, that
I
makes
know
sense.
Soda Piggy's busy with a billion things, so am I. I'm not quite at the point where I want to work on another full-length game right now, where I'll be happy to keep adding content to both Kaiju and Walthros for the near future.
Right, you just put Walthros out recently, so...
Yeah, it was about 1.5 years ago. And I spent the last year adding on to that, adding quite a bit of new material.
Yeah, dealing with the console release. You've been busy. You've been really busy as a dev. Yeah. So you talked about a lot of it was, branching off of this initial concept, but was there anything that you had to cut due to time or scope, things like this?
Yeah, so a whole area of the game was cut in between Boston and the final zone of the game, where you'd go in the final game, you go into the abyss. You return back to the area from the beginning of the game. It's expanded greatly. There's new monsters, new characters, a whole city sprouted up. In the original pitch concept, you were actually going to go to Tokyo instead. And the big joke there was, it's a time travel game. You go to all these different years. The game is set in 2016. You would be time traveling all the way back to 2015. And there'd be all these gags about running into your younger self. Like the younger American Beetle would be this big punk with no respect for anything, even though it was probably only a couple months before the main story begins. So that was a fun one.
That sounds funny. Yeah.
Yeah, that was going to require more map tiles than basically any area in the game. And there was just no way there was enough time to build that and actually get this game done in any reasonable amount of time.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it was going to climax with the heroes finding a ray that helped them become huge to fight the giant turtle kaiju Vegidius. He ended up becoming a major boss in the Abyss area instead. So a lot of those concepts still stuck around, but yeah, the whole Tokyo section ended up going. I was a little
Yeah.
sad about that, but I think honestly it was better for pacing for it to go from going to Boston right into the surreal stuff, right into the moon. I think the
Right.
flow of the final game is just a lot stronger.
Yeah. Okay. So it kind of saved you in terms of flow. Gosh, so interesting to hear the origin of this void area. One of my favorites in the game. Yeah, and so I guess a lot of those ideas ended up in the void. Was
They
like,
did, yeah.
gosh, like what is it like? American Beatles' uncle or grandpa? Is
His
that from?
grandfather's in there as a spirit,
Yeah,
yeah, who encourages him to get up and fight again.
yeah. Was that initially in the Tokyo area or?
That was going to show up in a dream sequence. I wasn't ever really sure where it was going to show up, but once we moved into, okay, now he's back in the weird dream realm, that was really the perfect place to put it.
Yeah, yeah. Fits naturally in. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I like the idea with American Beetle of we never know if it's real, if he beats this ghost, or if he's just been, taking one too many steel chairs to the head.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe so. What a cool moment in the game. Yeah.
But no
Wow.
matter no matter what, he's still optimistic about everything, even if he's hallucinating ghosts.
Yeah, he's got the fighting spirit.
He does.
So, yeah. Gosh, speaking of your levels, they include these great loops and shortcuts. That's pretty rare in these retro JRPGs. Was there a specific game that you were drawing inspiration from?
Yeah, so very, very different game from Kaiju and very different from turn-based RPGs in general, but a lot of Dark Souls influence, especially in the very first area of the game, with kind of the dead ghosts that give you gameplay advice,
Oh,
moving
that's so Dark
structure.
Souls. Yes.
Yeah, the aesthetic of the checkpoints, and
Uh
less of
huh.
that in other areas, but I kind of wanted to get that doomed world feeling right as you're starting out the game, and then
Yeah.
have players kind of rebuilding the world as they go through, which is another kind of connection to Legend of Mana as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. There are all these like guys, just sort of around in this sort of abandoned world that you can
Yep.
bring back to the hub base.
Yeah,
Uh,
everyone's all scattered, and then you're rebuilding your little community.
yeah, very Dark Souls.
Yep.
I'm a huge Dark Souls fan. So, yeah, maybe that's why I like Kaiju Big Battle FIGHTO Fantasy so much. Holy cow.
Yeah, I think an underrated part of the Souls games too is I think they're really funny. I feel like
They are.
people don't give them enough credit for being as funny as they are.
They're hilarious, right?
They
My
are.
goodness. Like the pyromancer that you find in the depths, right?
Yep.
Or, yeah, he's just like in a barrel.
Yeah. I love the cat in Dark Souls 2 who brings him into the
Yes.
cat covenant.
Yeah.
All the turtles, the turtle pope in Elden Ring. Yeah, I just think there's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
hilarious stuff there.
Yeah, yeah, my goodness. And just sort of like the impact. I feel like somebody at FromSoft is paying attention to making the impact of death just so funny to watch. You
Yeah,
know?
it really
There's
is.
something about an ogre like coming up behind you and just bonking you with a giant thing that's like
Yep.
awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Glad that we got to talk about Dark Souls.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So, gosh, but let's talk a little bit more about other features from Kaiju Big Battle. There's this great badge system that gives players tons of build flexibility. How do you encourage players to experiment with new builds even into the late game?
So that one was funny because the whole badge system came about because playtesters early on wanted more character customization. And they said, there's really only one way to play American Beetle. There's only one way to play Dusto Bunny. Um, is there any way to kind of mix this up? So the idea that I put in there was pins. And that comes from Kaiju as a whole has always been big on pins. And for example, here's an American Beetle. Here's Los
That's so
Plantanos.
cool.
Here's a Dr. Cube one. Here's a
Yeah.
general Kaiju Big Battle one. So a lot of the pins that they give out at shows or they send out with their merch, I wanted to bring into the game as an equipable item that would have different stats and really allow you to customize each character. And I thought it was funny that some of them are totally worthless. And that's how any gacha system is. You're going to get a lot of garbage. Thankfully, this
Yeah.
is a game that doesn't charge you real money for that, and it charges very few in-game points to buy. And
Yeah.
yeah, I set it up so that players are likely to get one of the worst pins in the game early on, based on
Hmm.
Super Wrong, who is a kaiju hero who cares more about dancing than saving the world. And yeah, so it's a badger. If you equip it, it lowers every stat. I just thought that was funny. I hope no one
Yeah.
saw that and then didn't go back for more.
Yeah. My goodness, that's hilarious. Um, yeah, I love Super Wrong. He's got like the perfect afro and everything.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's walking around Egypt in a black bodysuit with a huge feathery headdress on, and to the surprise of no one, he passes out in the desert.
Ah, yeah. So, gosh, that's so interesting that it was the initial feedback of players, and then you kind
It
of
was,
like
yeah.
put this on super late in development. The
I did,
pins.
and that's not always the smartest thing to do because then I had to rebalance a lot of the game's combat around that. And as anyone making games knows, any change you make can affect everything. And
Hmm.
we certainly ran into a few of those, making some changes for the console port that seemed innocuous at the time that ended up reverberating throughout the entire game. But hey,
Right. Yeah.
we fixed just about everything.
Yeah. Yeah. We managed to fix it all. Yeah, but goodness gracious, it's fun to think that one of these great mechanics could have just been tacked on at the end,
Yeah,
and yeah, like offer so much creative flexibility to players. So speaking of another character, or I guess speaking of a character that offers a similar type of flexibility, there's this Gao type Robox in your party. Was
yep.
this always a part of the design, or?
He was. So Roblox was an early character who I'm always a fan of, and I have him right here.
Oh, that's
So here,
great.
here's a plush Roblox that I got years and years ago. I can't even remember which show that was from, but yeah, they produced some plush Roblox when they were really pushing him as one of the big characters, and I've always been a fan since. I'm a fan of classic sci-fi and horror, like 40s and 50s, where you would have very, very little budget and just make the best of what you could. Make a
Hmm.
robot out of whatever laundry room materials you could find. So with Roblox, he's made from a cardboard box, some dryer tubes for arms, and a spaghetti strainer for head. And I always found that hilarious. I wanted to be a part of the game. And I decided he would be the blue mage type who could scan enemies and learn abilities and upgrade his stats because I thought it would be cool to take this character who looks like a joke character and showing that if you put the time into treating him right, he can really become something great. He can become the most powerful character in the game to the surprise of everyone around him. So yeah, he was an early mechanic that I was very excited that we finally get to once the player gets to the Boston zone.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess you can kind of tell that he is maybe a pet party member because there's like a whole level like and levels throughout the game centered around him.
Yeah,
Really, really a party member worth just checking out all of his content in full. Um, so yeah, that's cool that you kind of like built the game around that.
yeah,
Um, Yeah. So we mentioned this void level earlier in the interview. It's like it takes place between life and death. It's funny, but also really unsettling. For example, the room with the blue ladies physically constructing men, or the guy stuck between worlds. It's kind of like a distinctly psychedelic undertone. And so I wanted to know, like, what inspired this?
yeah. So that's been a part of my games forever to have this dream layer under them, similar to what I was talking about with the hacking missions. And
Hmm.
this is something a little different than that, in that it's a real place, but also not. And it's kind of a gooey connection between everything, hence all the slime everywhere. And I don't really think of my various games as having like canon connections between them. I don't think that's particularly interesting, but I think thematically having this like nightmarish underworld kind of appearing through all of them has been a fun connection to have this veil that players can look through in
Yeah.
Kaiju and Ghost Towns and Sea Cane and Walthros, that this shows up everywhere, and it's a dream. and it's not. And that's kind of how I see games and movies as a whole. It's that they're fleeting experiences that fade. And there's something sad about that, but also beautiful. And yeah,
Right.
sometimes it's a nightmare and you just can't wake up. Sometimes that's life too.
Right. So it's kind of like this meta commentary on media in general. You
Yeah, there's
know,
a lot of that.
yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. My goodness, I can see why you made such a point to include the slime and stuff. Then, yeah, goodness. So, yeah, another sort of idiosyncratic level would be the Russia level. It's in this level, you assist a team of revolutionaries in their pursuit of food, water, and even explosives. Where were you coming from when you designed this area?
So that was one when I decided I wanted every zone to have a different structure to it. So the initial Abyss, it's a tutorial. Egypt is linear towns and dungeons. Rome is very puzzle heavy. With Russia, I wanted to kind of try an open world survival type setting that would kind of
Mm-hmm.
goof on the whole Walking Dead, Last of Us. And there's seasonal themings to that too. Egypt has a summery vibe, Rome spring, Boston has fall leaves everywhere. For winter, I decided to go with Russia. It's snowing throughout the area. The snow gets heavier and thicker as you go on, and there's
That's
a
a cool
few,
detail.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's a few characters in there that are references to pop culture Russian characters. So you have the man in the survival base with the pink hair is based on Ilya Muromets, who's a Russian folk hero. There's a great movie based on his story that has some incredible puppets, including a monster that looks quite a bit like Godzilla's King Ghidorah, and that's a fun
Mm.
movie. You have the woman who is with him, who has the blue bodysuit and the blonde hair, is a reference to Mary Ivanskaya from the Tobal fighting games. So I thought it was fun to have some kind of Russian pop culture characters in there. Um,
Right.
but it turns out people didn't like this area as much as others.
Huh.
I ran a poll after I released the PC version of what is your favorite area, what's your least favorite area,
Mm.
and nearly everyone picked Russia as their least favorite. And I hope that doesn't mean they hated it, but um, players in general didn't seem as receptive to the more open structure of the area. And for me, that was a lesson learned. Um,
Mm-hmm.
People liked the more guided experience. And yeah, it was. I probably wouldn't design this area the same way again, but I hope players played the console version aren't deterred by me saying that and still enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's something interesting, it might not be for every player, but there's something very interesting about a open field sort of level
Yeah.
design in a JRPG. Um, yeah, I think a lot of people, they play these games and they want to shut their brain off, right? And, but it kind of like encourages you to explore and more actively engage with your surroundings. So I think that's pretty commendable. Yeah. So awesome. Yeah. The game really encourages this sense of 100% completion. Every side quest, every NPC feels very worthwhile. One of my favorite features is that every character gives you at least one substantial dialogue choice. How did you approach designing this type of optional content so it didn't kill pacing or feel like filler?
Yeah, so I really wanted to make it feel like these NPCs all have their own lives, that they don't just pop up to say, welcome to Egypt town. This is the desert. Things are hot in the desert. And we're in this because the desert's hot. I wanted them to show up and say, hey, mummies are awesome. What do you think about mummies? Do you like skeletons or mummies? And if you say skeletons, say, what's wrong with you? If you say mummies, then this little kid says, yeah, I'm all right with you. And she gives you a mummy fan club badge. So yeah, I wanted these characters to really feel alive, and I wanted seeking them out to be fun. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where the Yakuza influence comes out. And in those games, um, I love everything about the games, but the main story is never my main draw. My draw is always the side stories and the weird people you meet along the way. And I wanted to try to capture that kind of feeling in both Kaiju and Walthros when it comes to interacting with side stories, with discovering secrets in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to do anything like collect 100 doodads to complete this quest. To me, that would
Yeah.
be boring both to design and play, and
Yeah.
it wouldn't really tell us anything about the characters. So I'd rather have, strange NPCs like a muscle man who his brother's been turned into a mummy, but because he
Mm-hmm.
feels so much guilt, he can't body slam him into the coffin the way he should. So you have to go there and wrestle his brother for him. So
Right.
I thought it was fun to really give these very personal little stories. Or, you have a ghost in the toilet who has some bowel problems and you have to seek out
Yeah.
some items to uncurse his toilet. So
Yeah.
I just found that more rewarding to really make these quests absurd and memorable, and I hope people enjoy them.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite. Like, sometimes they're just like, do you like mummies or skeletons? Like,
Yep.
yeah, or, I hate you, right? And that's really cool. That's really substantial, right? It's hilarious. It's satisfying. But one of my favorite in the game was this old river lady in Egypt, right? And then
Yep.
you encounter her later in the game, and she says, like, don't
Yeah.
get lost in, like, nostalgia or something, right?
Yeah. So
You get
her
stuck in
idea
the
is that
past.
she's seeing across time, and she's a very, very minor character, but I liked the idea of this character who you might not even notice in another life is someone incredibly important. I
Right.
thought that was a fun detail to put in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoyed that. It all feels good, even the side characters like this old lady.
Yep.
So, what about the unique color scheme? I guess you talked about earlier with the NES color palette that you were starting
Yep.
out with. How did you and Soda Piggy arrive on the color palette you have now?
Yeah, so originally it was a much simpler palette. I was going to use a 16 color palette that was closer to what you'd see on the NES. Um, as we worked together and we came up with concepts of how the game should look, uh, the final palette that was all Soda Piggy, and the
Mm-hmm.
idea between the colors and kind of the chunky graphics we went with was for the game to feel Game Boy Advance inspired, to have these big, bold, bright graphics. Playing a launch Game Boy Advance, sometimes you couldn't see what was going on in some of these games, especially darker ones like the first Castlevania on Game Boy Advance. It's a game I
Right.
loved, but was always hard to see what was going on. So
Totally.
yeah, some games compensate for that by using these super saturated graphics. So that was the kind of look we went for with this. And yeah, I think it worked out really well. And when we first started designing the characters, they were proportioned very differently. They were more
Hmm.
realistically proportioned, but for both the sake of making it feel like a throwback and simplifying the workload, we ended up going with more of a chibi design, and I think that
Right.
was absolutely the right move, and I love how the game looks in its final form.
Wow. Yeah, that is fantastic. From using this bright color palette to emulate the Game Boy Advance aesthetic to, getting these chibi sprites in, I think it really emulates the retro thing that you guys are going for. Um, it's great. So what about the soundtrack? It goes from funky to unhinged. What inspired this unique genre mix?
Yeah, so the way I work with Glock at 8-bit, it's a way that would probably annoy a lot of composers. I
Mm-hmm.
don't say anything like, I want a song that sounds like a Dragon Quest cave. I want battle music that sounds like Final Fantasy V's battle music. I give them an emotional description. And one of the ones I wrote down that I saved, I looked up, I wrote to Brian, I want a song that sounds like slime. You're uncomfortable and frowning, but you're getting through it. And
Mm-hmm.
some composers would read that and say, what on earth are you talking about? What's wrong with you? But Brian immediately knew what I meant and was able to put out these great songs that fit the emotion of each stage. And so, yeah, I'd tell him, this is what the stage feels like, less, this is what happens in this stage. And I think
Wow.
it worked out wonderfully.
That's so cool that you guys had this cohesive workflow. Was there any level in particular that was maybe shaped by the music that they contributed rather than the other way around?
Yeah, I think the apartments in Boston,
Uh huh.
the song that he gave me there was really this kind of melancholy song that this was just going to be an area you ran into some apartments, there might be some items. And I heard this song, and it sounded to me, honestly, it sounds a little bit like some of the music you'd hear from an Akira Yamaoka soundtrack. It sounds a little bit like Silent Hill 3. And I loved the mood that this song gave, and that led to me expanding the apartment areas and giving some side stories there and just making that area have more presence. And I actually liked that
Yeah,
song so much that I ended up reusing it in Walthros as well. And
it's
yeah, I
great.
think it's a classic.
Very distinct liminal lived-in vibe for those
Yeah,
apartments.
there's a
Yeah,
lot of story here, whether there's people here still or not.
yeah, I like that stuff. I like that stuff. So, Easter eggs. Tons of Easter eggs in the game. My favorite, definitely the Starman in the Roblox level. But what's your favorite?
Yeah, so I have two. So one is the ice cream monster in the Boston area is based on a specific ice cream sundae made at Friendly's. So Friendly's is a New England ice cream chain that there's
Yeah,
not as many of them now as there used to be. They closed a lot of stores in the last few years. I still have one near me, thankfully, and
right. Because
they
you live in
always do.
Boston, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I live
Okay.
in the Boston area, so a lot of the Boston references in that zone are very much me. And
Hmm.
with the ice cream monster, he's the one major boss in the game that's an original design and not a kaiju. I ran him by Randy to make sure this is okay. Everyone was on board. But yeah, so Friendlies does monthly Sundays. Like this month right now, they're selling a Sunday that's an octopus made out of gummy worms for tentacles. But one of their signature monster ice creams has this cone for a head, these clown eyes, this mouth going everywhere. And I said that would be really good as a horror monster. So I kind of
Hmm.
built that kaiju around this ice cream sundae, and said that would be a great
Wow.
thing to punch.
Yeah. What a cool Bostonian reference.
Yeah, the other one is this. So this is a piece of meat signed by Dr. Cube. This is a fragment of Midori no Kaiju, who was the very first character designed by Randy years and years ago, 1995. And Midori died in the ring. And Dr. Cube, being who he is, chopped up the body and sold off the pieces at the merch table. So I got this autographed picture of a character, this character's meat. And for the game, I decided there's going to be chunks of Midori scattered throughout the game. So in every region of the game, you have these cultists that are trying to resurrect this old monster by gathering this meat. And that was meant to be kind of a Castlevania thing with like cultists gathering Dracula pieces. Like
Hmm.
Castlevania was one of the first games that I remember really loving. I remember my brother bringing home the NES with Castlevania, and that probably started my love of monsters and monster movies and led to me seeking out like all the Universal classics. But yeah, so these cultists are gathering monster chunks, and when you gather them, you get to fight Midori as the game's secret super boss. So I thought that was a fun one to include, and that was a character that Randy had asked, could you include her in some way? And yeah, I was happy to, and I thought bringing in the monster meat was an obscure and fun thing to throw in there.
That's so cool. I've been wondering about the meat origin story, and
Yeah,
gosh, to see it like right there in your hands as well is
yeah,
awesome.
it's still here. It's still rubbery and gross. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's autographed. It says
So
Dr. Cube
surreal.
approved right on it. It's real meat of Midori no
Dr.
Kaiju.
Cube approved.
Yep, Dr.
Oh
Cube
my
approved.
goodness.
Accept
That's
no
great.
substitutes.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, yeah, we've talked a lot about what's in the game, but yeah, how are you feeling? Like what does it mean to you now today, launch day, that Kaiju Big Battle is on consoles?
It's been incredibly cool. I mean, as a kid, the dream was always, oh, I want my guys on the Nintendo. That would be cool. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I drew game concepts on paper and with paper and pencil long before I was ever coding anything.
Hmm.
And
Me too.
it's awesome seeing it on all the systems, seeing it on PlayStation, on Xbox. But yeah, seeing it on Nintendo console was kind of the dream as a kid. So seeing it there now, it's surreal. And yeah, I was
Yeah.
playing this morning and just like seeing the PlayStation trophies pop up right there made it feel so official and so different than just playing it on my own computer where it's, you know, I love PC games, but it's kind of the Wild West in a way. Everyone builds their own things their own way, whether even if you're using
Hmm.
Steam. So yeah, seeing that kind of as part integrated into the Nintendo architecture, the PlayStation architecture, it's been really cool to see.
Yeah, gosh. What a great vibe. What a great vibe.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, gosh. So I'm very happy to hear that. What is your favorite improvement that we brought to the console version?
Yeah, so one of the major things we had to figure out for doing the port was improving controller support. There was controller support in the game originally, but it was pretty minimal. It didn't cover every controller out there. The buttons weren't really designed the way you'd want them to be. So yeah, once I started working with Electric Airship and we really started discussing how things should work, then I went back to James and Ralph and said, here's some suggestions from them. Here's what I'm thinking. How can we really make the controller experience smooth? And now I played it on multiple different controllers today on consoles, and I think it feels great. And that's been very cool to me. It's very different
Yeah,
than playing on a keyboard or with my ancient Logitech.
yeah, totally. And there's new content even. There's like new NPCs to interact with, stuff like this too, right?
Yeah, there's been lots of little additions that are, they're being backported into the PC build as well. And more to come, I hope.
Yeah, so exciting. Yeah, there's stuff to look forward to even still. So, um, yeah, gosh, beyond Kaiju Big Battle, you just released Walthros. You have a huge gamography, 27 years of games. Which of your games should more people be checking out?
So if you want to just get kind of a quick glance of what I'm about in my sense of humor, the Super Walrus Entertainment System is the place to go. It's free. It has a handful of games in there, various genres. You have some action, you have a text adventure, you have an RPG, you have some mini games I worked on with James. Um, the framing device of the whole thing is that you're in this dirty, smelly arcade um, full of delinquent characters from various games I've worked on. Um, every day of the week, there's a different crowd in there, telling you stay away from the pool table, it's mine. Strange things on TV. And yeah, so you can check that out. That's on both Steam and Itch. It's a free download. And
Yeah.
I hope that people could enjoy at least one of the games in there. If they want to check out something larger after they're done with Kaiju, then Walthros Renewal is another RPG that's similar in length to Kaiju. It's actually a little bit longer, and it was one I developed more on my own, more for me. Walthros, the original, was my first game, as I'd said, so Renewal was a remake that was really me taking everything I learned from Kaiju, everything I learned from the years in between, and saying, I want to take my very first project and
Hmm.
make it something that I could be really proud of now. And
Yeah.
yeah, I worked again with Glock and 8-Bit on the
Hmm.
soundtrack there. But other than that, that was a solo project that took
Right.
4 years, and I'm happy with that, how that turned out too. And all goes
Yeah.
well, I'd love to see that one come to consoles too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, gosh, like, if I'm not mistaken, the Walthros is really a game for you, like, more than any other
Yeah,
property. It's really where you get your creative juices flowing.
yeah, it's I'd say every main character in the game is some aspect of me, for better or worse. Um,
Hmm.
I certainly would not say any of them are 100% me, but yeah, you get a pretty good look inside my brain playing through that game.
Yeah. Well, awesome. 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 So, what is your advice for indie RPG devs starting today, wanting to make their best possible debut?
I would say you have to make something that's you.
Uh
You have
huh.
to make something that's unmistakably your own. And even with the Kaiju game, even though it's an adaptation, I still feel like people that have played and have played my other games will immediately identify this as my kind of humor, my kind of flow.
Hmm.
And I think that's important for your games to be distinctly you. And that's not like going back to Willie Electric's. His games have such a distinct feel, visually, tonally. There's not really anything else like them, and I think that makes them a wonderful experience. And so, yeah, I'd say get weird with it and be you, and don't chase trends. And
Yeah.
you might love farming, you might love Stardew Valley, you might really want to make a farming game, and if you do, go for it.
Yeah.
But don't look at Stardew and say that game made a lot of money and I want a lot of money. I'm gonna rip it
Hmm.
off and change the graphics because
Yeah.
no one will care because they already have Stardew. and they don't want to buy a bad knockoff of it.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, if you have something that really expresses yourself through farming, then go for it. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you spend years chasing trends, and games take a long time to make, the
Mm-hmm.
trends are going to leave you behind.
Yeah. 3 years down the line, what you're going to have is yourself looking at what you've been spending your time on. And
Yeah.
you're going to ask yourself, am I proud of this? You know?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's important to make something that you are proud of. And
Yeah.
another word of advice is don't use generative AI because you're not going to be proud
Word.
of that. You didn't do it.
No. Yeah. No, it's antithetical to art as a whole. Yeah.
It is. It's toxic. It's poisonous to the soul, as they've been saying.
Yeah. You just got to cut that AI out of your life. Get rid of it. Yeah.
Yep, no matter how hard every program we use tries to force it in. But hey, that's another reason to use a niche engine like OHR because it's never going to have AI components added to it.
You don't need AI with OHR because you could just talk to the creators.
Yep. You could say, James, help me do this.
That's awesome. So, yeah, final question for me. But then we got some fan questions, of course. Cube-headed villains, reality warping slugs, they're already running wild on our screens, on our consoles. How are you going to top that in your next game? Do you have any plans?
Yeah, so right now, it's making additions to Walthros and Kaiju, making updates. If I ever did make a second Kaiju game, I had a few concepts for what I wanted to do there. So this guy right here, with the space bug, there's a whole space bug empire in Kaiju Big Battle, and they don't appear in this game outside of the mini games and some references, but they don't actually show up to battle, or they're not part of the plot. So I thought what would be fun for a sequel would be, instead of traveling through time, would be getting in your giant disco ball shaped spaceship and planet hopping, going from world to world, fighting alien monsters and saving the universe. And I didn't really want to include like sequel teasers or leave any loose ends with this game, so everything's pretty nicely tied up at the end, but there's still a possibility for places it can go. Without spoiling the ending, things are fairly weird after it's all wrapped up. Another idea I thought would be fun would be to make a game starring Dr. Cube, and to have a sequel where he's accidentally the hero, and he gets pulled into another world where the kaiju heroes are the villains. And so American Beetle is an imperialist monster, and Dusto Bunny is Toxic Sludge. And his reason for saving the world won't be, I want to do good. It will be, I can't let these villains outshine me. This is my game. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of swap the roles for a sequel.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. Everybody loves to hate Dr. Cube, right?
Yeah, and he's such a fun character.
Yeah.
Yeah, for now, just working on updates.
Yeah, just working on updates for now, but you've got plenty of avenues to explore in a potential sequel.
Yeah.
All right. We ready for some fan questions?
Let's go.
Sweet. Okay. Anonymous asks, what's the deal with all those blobs?
So, there are a lot of blobs. The purple blobs in this game are called Goobles, and they're inspired by the slimes from Dragon Quest. And I think the blob monsters are probably always my favorite monster type in RPGs. So yeah, Dragon Quest, you got the slimes. Final Fantasy, you have the flan and pudding type monsters. The Atelier series, you have the Punies. So I just think it's hilarious. Even outside of RPGs, you have the whole Puyo Puyo series. There's just something funny about blob monsters to me. So the Goobles are kind of a Dragon Quest slime that's, cannibalistic and horrifying, and grows as it consumes and becomes more humanoid and horrifying. And I thought that was kind of funny that, there's this behind the cutesy slime monster, there is kind of this hellish nature to everything. And
Right.
with the Goobles too, the name actually came from a poll. And back in the day when we were just getting started, we were just working on the first area. Soda Piggy and I put out a poll on social media that said, what should these things be called? And Goobles was kind of supposed to be the joke answer. That's the one everyone liked. So they are now Goobles.
Yeah, good times. Well, it's a good name. Yeah. Goodness gracious. They can be very intimidating when there's a lot of them, too.
They can gang up on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, there's that moment with Kung Fu Chicken Noodle Soup where they're just like really cornering you there. Yeah.
That's the highest number of NPCs on screen in this game at any time is when they all swarm there towards the end.
Yeah, that is wild. That is wild stuff. So, yeah, goodness. Angelo asks, what lesson did you learn during or after work on Kaiju Big Battel and Walthros Renewal?
So with FIGHTO Fantasy, I really had to learn a lot about project management. Like I'd worked with people in smaller capacities before, but working with Soda Piggy here was the longest term partnership I've had working on a game, the most commitment. So it had to be the most detailed, the most planned out. So that was very new to me. It was a learning curve, and I'm thankful that he stuck with me through any missteps there and any muddled plans I put out as things changed. Um, so yeah, I learned a lot about project management there.
Wow.
Yeah, so my kid was born during Kaiju development, so that was a huge life change, and I had to learn
Right.
about
During
myself and
development.
how to find time to do the things I want to do outside of having a job and parenting. And yeah, that was it. That's two full-time jobs, honestly. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, with Walthros, it was much easier. My kid's older.
Right.
She actually watched me work on it sometimes. She drew some of the monsters with crayon and pen that I then
Really?
translated into pixel art. Yeah, so that was a very different experience. So, yeah, there's a world you go to in Walthros that's um, kind of another place between worlds, not quite the same as the Abyss in Kaiju,
Mm.
but it's a hotel that kind of takes in people who haven't found their direction in life. And
Mm.
I wanted some really abstract monsters there. So she drew these various birds and turtles that, yeah, I turned into pixel art. And I think they're delightful and kind of gross in a good way.
Yeah, that's awesome. My goodness. Yeah, I'd love to see that stuff. That's great. So, Bob the Hamster, creator of the OHR engine, has a question for you here.
Yeah.
Do you have any music that you listen to when you create?
Yeah. So it's funny because my wife and I are exact opposites when it comes to music. We're both creative people. And when she's working on projects, she'll listen to instrumentals. She needs something that it's not lyric heavy, something that she can just zone out in. For me, I'm the opposite, and I like to listen to extremely lyrical heavy music while I'm working. So for modern music, I'm listening to Marina, to Lana Del Rey, Melanie Martinez, Gorillaz, Poppy, stuff that's heavy on beat, heavy on lyric, and older music. I listen to Digital Underground or Barry Manilow, Linda Ronstadt,
Mm-hmm.
Simon and Garfunkel. Elton John is a big one for me. Elton John's been a huge influence on a lot of my creative life, um,
Yeah.
to the point that there's a turtle character in Walthros Renewal, one of the player characters, who's a turtle musician who's based on Elton John. And I had a lot of fun with that character. His role in the party is he's the one who buffs everyone up. He's the hype man. So he performs different songs that get the party ready to go. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
music's a big part of everything for me.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. And respect to you for being able to listen to these lyrics while you work. That is very foreign to somebody like me.
Yeah, so many of my friends say that. Like, yeah, I don't know why. That's how my brain works.
Yeah. Well, cool. Good for you. More questions from Bob the Hamster here. We got consoles can feel kind of special. Can you share a console related memory from your life?
Yeah, so aside from childhood, one of the most fun experiences I've had with a console game was on the Wii with Muscle March, which is it's a game where you're playing various speedo-clad muscle men who are all oiled up and rampaging through the world, um, chasing after a thief who's stolen their protein powder, and you have to strike poses using the remotes to imitate the muscle men on screen as you bust through the walls. And every person I've shown this to has loved it. Even people that aren't really into playing video games, which that was a big part of the Wii. Uh,
Hmm.
People were delighted. I still think it's a fun game to break out. It was a Namco title that honestly, I'm surprised has never been ported into any modern VR motion control system, because it's hilarious, and there's currently no way to buy it since it's one of those games that was a Wii eShop game, and
Hmm.
what do you do with that now? Yeah,
Right.
great memory of a console game there that I would love to see reintroduced somewhere.
Yeah. Muscle March, huh? Like, it sounds like such a unique concept. Gosh, I bet people couldn't help but like that one.
Yeah, very much worth looking up videos for anyone who hasn't played it.
Yeah. Yeah, will do. Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. So, besides music, what else gets you into a creative game making mood?
So film. I watch a lot of movies, and I've heard people say, the average person watches like 4 films a year. I tend to average like a
4?
hundred. Yeah, it's always shocked me. Um,
Ludicrous.
yeah, like I had a job years and years ago where I sold movie tickets for like a benefits company, and that's what we got from a lot of our customers. That yeah, they might use 4 a year. And I was shocked by that because I tend to watch like 150 at least a year. And
Hmm.
compared to some of my movie buddies online, that's nothing. Um, I have friends who are already on their 400, 500th movie of the year that they've logged on Letterboxd, and
Hmm.
I'm extremely jealous of them for having that amount of time and dedication to it. I wish I could
Yeah.
watch more than I do without falling asleep, but I'm exhausted all the time right now. But yeah,
Hmm.
with influences from film and just the way it gets me going and thinking. Um, like with Final Fantasy, there's a lot of environmental and elemental themes to it, and that's
Hmm.
the kind of thing you'd see in a lot of Ishiro Honda's films. And Honda is the creator of Godzilla, director of a lot of the first generation Godzilla films. Um,
Interesting.
Invasion of Astro Monster, one of his best. I'd say of any Godzilla, that's the one that influenced me the most. Um,
Huh.
Other Honda films that I think are worth checking out, influential. Matango, which is a film about paranoia, transformation, kind of kind of like The Thing in a lot of ways.
Oh,
Less
that
less
sounds
gory,
great.
but it's
Still horror, though.
people. Yeah, people turning into mushroom monsters, and are they or aren't they? Is it hallucination? Is it real? Survivor's guilt, all this stuff, but still kind of darkly funny the whole time.
Hmm.
And another one of his that's a big influence, the Mysterians, um, alien invaders that are wearing what would basically be later called like Sentai suits. So everything from like Power Rangers, all these characters all go back to the concepts from the Mysterians. So the whole masked hero thing is obviously a big part of kaiju. It's a big part of me, from
Hmm.
Japanese movies to lucha libre in Mexico, which I love
Hmm.
a lot of these old lucha films.
Hmm.
Guillermo Calderon, Rene Cardona, directors, producers that made a lot of the El Santo films. I'm right
Yeah.
now wearing a Blue Demon mask, who was El Santo's buddy. Um, One of the best movies of all time, in my opinion, is Blue Demon and El Santo fight Dracula and the Wolfman. And
That
the
sounds
title,
awesome.
it's exactly what the title implies. It's these two best buddies who they play, they wear nice suits and masks and play chess and drink tea until Dracula comes back from the grave, along
Oh,
with
I
a
hate it when that
horde of
happens.
yeah, and he comes back with a horde of wolfmen this time. And the wolfmen are all wearing these impeccable 70s silk blouses, and it's just this gorgeous fashion on these wonderfully hairy men. And yeah, so what do you do when these monsters are everywhere? You wrestle them. And
Naturally.
films like that really get me in the mood for working on something like Kaiju or Walthros, because they blend just the absolute absurd with seriousness. The the characters aren't winking at you. They are treating everything as if it's life and death, even if it's totally completely ridiculous. And
Right.
yeah, that's a thing that I like about a lot of the early Godzillas too. You have some
Right.
that are extremely serious, some that are extremely silly, and then ones like Astro Monster that really perfectly walk the line between both.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Cool to hear about your inspirations. Just out of my own curiosity, is there a moment in Kaiju Big Battle where you really ride that line successfully?
I feel like a lot of the Abyss area was that way, where like you're talking to a trash can in one part who's asking you to feed him garbage, and that's depressing. It's this strange character who has nothing going on in his life except a deep desire to put trash in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think it's pretty funny that it's a talking trash can, and that your characters don't treat it any differently than anyone else they meet. No one says, "What the heck is that?" It's natural that there's a talking trash can. It's natural that there's a 12-foot turkey in Boston that you have to fight.
Right.
Yeah, and he's another Easter egg. That there was a lot of at the time in 2016 through 2020, there was an extremely large turkey that spent a lot of time in Harvard Square and throughout Cambridge, and so that character is another little bit of Boston lore, and that we had a very large turkey who caused trouble for students and tourists. So he appears in this game as something you can wrestle.
Wow. I love just the depth to this Boston area being revealed here that most people, it just go way over their head.
Yeah. Gosh. I had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's that, there's the lobster with the hat and everything.
Yeah, this Revolutionary War era lobster with New England love of lobster and seafood meeting the old world. And another thing with Boston is that by the time you're in the Boston area, the timeline, spoiler alert, the timeline is kind of getting screwy, and things that are there that shouldn't be, things that are happening later, things that are happening earlier. So I thought it was funny that, hey, there's Revolutionary era hats here for some reason. Also, there's statues that weren't made until the 90s showing up here, which that's going to not get noticed by most players, but I think people who have lived in Boston their whole lives will find that fun.
Wow. There's a really impressive layer of subtlety there. That's awesome. Really a game for people from Boston.
Yeah, there's a lot of love of the hometown as gross as it can be at times.
Yeah, of course, I'm not from Boston. I really enjoyed the experience, but hearing this stuff is adding a whole nother level.
Yeah, we have some extremely large rats, especially if you spend time in our subway system. So they show up in the game as something to fight as well.
Yeah, distinctly remember the giant rats. So, final question for Bob the Hamster. Are there any special foods you eat when you create?
So, absolutely not. In that I do not mix food and keyboards. I find it horrifying, and I know people I've worked with that eat at their keyboard, and I've looked in their keyboards and I see this layer of hell below the keys full of crumbs and stickiness. And I find the idea, I love food, but I find the idea of eating off my keyboard while I work nauseating. So I avoid eating when I'm working, but when it comes to food otherwise, I love anything spicy. Any noodles, any chicken that's just as spicy as you can make it, I will eat it.
Wow. Okay. You like it spicy. Definitely. There's something about a keyboard, like you're touching it so much, and it'd be hard to get under there to clean it, right? So
But spicy foods, the item that is used to revive players in Kaiju is a bottle of ghost pepper sauce. And that was kind of there for me as something that I think is a fun thing to wake up to, is a nice mouthful of sauce.
Yeah, gosh, that's just such a great name for your item, because it even gets the ghost sort of like death sort of thing in there.
Yeah.
Good times. Yeah, with the soup and everything as well.
Lots of high protein meals in there too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because they got to get swole.
They do.
For sure. Yeah. So, here we go. Sid is our next querent. What is the shortest development time game you've worked on? Probably these 48-hour games.
So that'd be the 48-hour games. Those were all pretty early in my game development history. I should try making some more. It was fun. But
that is
two
fun.
of those. One of them is Horse Game, which is a puzzle game where you're collecting horses and keys, and you have voiceover from a narrator played by me who taunts the player the whole time. Another one was Bufanda, which is a text adventure. And both of those are 48-hour games, and both of those are actually in the Super Walrus collection that's on Steam and itch. So yeah, those ones are
Great.
still around. They're still free if anyone wants to check them out.
That's sick. That's awesome. That's something I should do. There are a lot of small games that I've made over the years. I should just put them in a compilation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to just point to one thing and be like, this is my portfolio.
Yeah, and the main reason I did that was so I didn't have to, pay the fee to put my games on Steam 6 times.
Word. That's really smart.
Yeah, if this is going to be a game that players finish in 30 minutes and I'm not charging for, I don't want to have to pay the fee.
Right. It sounds like you got creative and like intentional with it too, with the different characters, how they react to the environment. What's the longest development?
Before I get to that, I'd honestly recommend people do join like 48-hour game jams. A lot of them are hosted on Twitch. Look into them. If you're a new developer, there's a lot of great brainstorming going on there and testing yourself at that limit. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you'll probably be able to find one within the week and then collaborate with some great creative people. That's been a formative thing for me as well.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, for longest game, so as far as active development went, I spent 4 years working on Walthros, just start to finish. So that was the longest active development, but total time, FIGHTO Fantasy was in active development for 3 years, but we had like 2.5 to 3 years of pre-planning before that, so nearly as long as the actual development. So honestly, there was like 5.5 to 6 years on and off of working on FIGHTO Fantasy, start to finish.
Wow.
And it helped me a lot as a developer. I learned so much that I've been able to apply to other games, learning about time management, project management, and I would hope I wouldn't have to spend that much time pre-planning another project, but I'm happy I did, and I'm happy with how everything turned out, and it really helped iron out a lot of the concepts we had.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about like the more applied process of planning something out when you have a responsibility to others, right?
Yeah.
It just makes you think a little bit more deeply about your personal projects, things that you move forward with in your career.
Definitely.
That's good stuff. So awesome that we've had the privilege of working with you on Kaiju Big Battle, for sure, one of your longest projects.
Yeah, I guess if you take the year we spent working on the console port, that puts it up to almost 7 years total.
7 years! Holy cow.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a long haul, definitely. But congrats.
Yeah,
and another from Sid here. How difficult is it to publish a game on consoles?
Yeah, so you guys at Electric Airship and James and Ralph with the engine did all the heavy lifting there. I got to learn a lot. I learned a lot about the idiosyncrasies of every platform, the kind of things Nintendo requires, Sony, Microsoft. They're all different. Some of the requirements made perfect sense to me. Some were extremely weird. Microsoft had some standards regarding buttons you could press to change to access game tag menus. And I was like, I wonder. I have no idea why that wouldn't have been like a universal thing. Why would I have to do that? And then ended up changing that by the time we actually released, and we didn't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, there was just getting a hang of what everyone wants as a platform holder was fascinating. So that was kind of tough to wrap my head around, and I'm very thankful that I had a publisher to work with for doing this, because I don't think I could have done it myself.
Yeah, definitely. It's a different level from Steam. There's a lot more, just graphics and PR and QA that goes into it. From us, we do a really intense QA because we know that it's going to get QA'd by all the console people as
Definitely.
well. So by the time your game is shipped on consoles, it's been played through several times, really just polished to, as close to perfect as we can get it.
And it's funny because that's the kind of thing, like when I've released anything, like with Walthros, I had a whole team of playtesters and myself playing through the game multiple times. And then we released it on Steam, and people found some bugs day one that none of us had found. And thankfully very easy to fix. But yeah, it's once you have it out there for a wider audience, people are gonna find everything.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, yeah, I guess that's a big thing is just getting rid of all those bugs early on because
Yeah.
we don't want those people to come day one talking about this. You talk to this guy, it crashes the game or something, right?
Yep.
Uh, yeah. So awesome, awesome, awesome. So great to have you on the podcast, PC.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so guys, Kaiju Big Battle is now available. You've heard it from the developer. You know, it's a great game. He put a lot of himself into it, as well as some of the characters that you know and love. So check it out on Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation for $19.99. Yeah,
Yeah, and reach out to me. I'd love to hear what any player thinks. Email me superwalrusgames@gmail.com. I'm on Blue Sky as surlaw.bluesky.social under the username Burger Snail. Yeah, reach out to me. I'm always happy to hear comments. Some of the comments I got on Steam were really encouraging back in the day. Some of them helped make it a better game. So yeah, I'm always excited to hear feedback from the players.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely also awesome to see as a developer. Yeah. So yeah, get in contact with PC if you have any feedback or compliments. And yeah, yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been Decent Treatment with PC Harrington. And yeah, catch you on the flip side.
Yep, and don't forget Roblox.